Hey, what's happening, everybody? Robert Phoenix here. Sorry, I had to cut the music. I was listening to Low Spark at the High Heel Boys by the great and I think underrated band Traffic with Stevie Winwood on keyboards. Rick Gretsch, right? Is he in Traffic? Dave Mason was in Traffic. Very good guitar player, Dave Mason. And of course, the percussionist, Rebop Kwaku Ba. Diving into those Afro rhythms that were starting to percolate through Western music at that time. That was in the early 70s. Interesting period for music, no doubt. A lot of experimentation, a lot of synthesis, fusion of various styles. It was a very exciting time. If you weren't around for it, you missed out, I have to say. Oh, man. Speaking of being around for it, guess who's here? Come on. He's been away. Come on, you can do this. There he is. He's got his new cat step to get on up here. Hi, everybody. First show of the new year. What's happening? What's going on? This is Robert Phoenix, of course, and you are you. Hold on a second. Yes, let me just do this list. We're going to get it together today. We're going to get it together to bring you some first class live streaming. In order to do that, though, we have to have this being a part of our experience. We cannot have Jasper most times without a song. Jasper, are you ready? Let's hear a little computer audio on that. Let's put the worm in your ear. And away we go.
Jasper, the astrological cat. Look up your chart, show you right where you're at. It's Jasper, the astrological cat.
There it is. The first Jasper, the astrological cat sighting for 2020. How is everybody? Let me check in with the chat room. I think we probably have some chat. I'm going to come up with a new name for you guys. It's Chatlandia. Chatlandians. Fellow Chatlandians. Good morning. Let me see who's in here today. Hey, there's Charles. Oh, yeah, John Levy. We got more coming on John Levy. We got more coming on the reset. It's happening. The socialists are dying, finally. Let's just hope that they're not replaced by the nationalist fascists. I don't have a problem with nationalism as long as it's not tied to Zionism. I'm okay with a good, healthy dose of nationalism. Like every country should feel good about itself. I mean, isn't that really kind of a social progressive ideal to feel good? Everybody feels good. Everybody gets a ribbon. Everybody gets a medal. Everybody gets to have a seat at the table. Isn't that like the spirit of nationalism? By the way, you poor people in Australia, you're still going through it. My heart goes out to you. My buddy Andres Bianchi, he's down there. He's fighting fires every single day. Scorched earth policy. The rumor is now that once those fires are done, well, nobody's going to want to live there. So let's just move some refugees. And this is all part of the reset, by the way. The refugee resettlement program, which is headed up by the UN, is part of the reset. And it's happening. It's going on now as we speak. I think today is David Bowie's birthday. Pretty sure of it. Let me just check here. Wish I could play some Bowie, man. Back on the old Blog Talk days, I used to be able to. January 8th is tomorrow. It's tomorrow. I'll do a little thing on Bowie tomorrow, since it's his birthday. I'll do a little tribute to David Bowie. Why not? It's also Elvis's birthday tomorrow too. You know, I was thinking about Elvis. I went into a documentary binge with my mother. My mother really likes documentaries, and especially around music. She's a big Elvis fan. She grew up during that period and that time. And so we sat down and we watched an Elvis documentary that was based on the Memphis Mafia, like his bodyguards And it was very telling. They had a lot of very interesting things to say, really behind the scenes kind of stuff. And the phenomenon of Elvis is kind of mind blowing. It's really kind of mind blowing in a lot of ways because he erupts so quickly. He just explodes onto the scene like the world has never seen anything like Elvis Presley before. Like, okay, the world has seen Chuck Berry, the world has seen Little Richard, the world has seen Jerry Lee Lewis, and trust me, back then those guys were very different. It was like, holy shit, there's a whole new thing coming, and rock and roll was a shockwave. But Elvis was a breed apart because Jerry Lee Lewis, while he was extremely talented, and he's still alive, by the way. Jerry Lee Lewis is still alive. Oh, Jerry Lee Lewis is extremely talented. I mean, he wasn't a whole lot to look at. Let's be honest. He had the mop of red hair, and he had that hillbilly, a classic kind of hillbilly look and hillbilly vibe. There wasn't a lot to look at. Little Richard, of course, was America's first drag queen superstar. To go back and look at the films, I mean, Little Richard is pretty much dressing in drag, about as close as you can get. And Little Richard, extremely talented. I mean, that's an act, by the way. Little Richard is an act that translates across time. Like it didn't translate later, like in the 70s, well, a little bit in the 70s. He used to show up on shows like Midnight Special and Don Kirshner's Rock Concert. A lot of those 50s rockers were still around and touring, but you could take somebody like Little Richard today and how he looks and his outrageousness. I mean, that act was probably about 60 years too soon. Think of Little Richard in today's musical environment, today's political climate. I was having a bit of I'm going to get back to Elvis in a second, but I was having a bit of a discussion with a good friend of mine last night, and we don't always see eye to eye, but it's always good to have a conversation with her. She's a socialist, progressive, without a viable model or tribe, and she's okay with that. She's an Aquarian, but she's living in California, so just wait long enough, you'll get what you want. You'll get your Chinese wet dream if you stay long enough in California. And it's really funny too, because California is going to move. They're threatening to move towards this model where like you're really going to be limited with, what is it, 55 gallons a week or something like that, like water. It's crazy. It's totally crazy because they want to support climate change and they want to keep the earth wet. Well, what California does is it empties out the Central Valley. It takes the water out of the freaking Central Valley, throws it into the ocean because it wants to like help out some, member of the fish population. Might be salmon, might be trout. I don't know what I think it's the salmon population, although trout is popping around, but they drain the Central Valley. The state is nuts. It's insane. It's totally insane. And then now they want to limit their water. Like you're not going to be able to grow gardens in California. Think about that. It's like one of the greatest growing places in the world. You want people to grow a garden. Anyway. So we got on this topic last night and we're just kind of, batting that stuff around and bringing it all back to Elvis Presley. We watched this documentary, my mother and I, and Elvis is so fascinating. Like I said, he just explodes onto the scene. He's like somebody from another dimension. Like the sex appeal was just off the charts, right? And he was a guy's guy. Like dudes loved Elvis, and to this day, like there's this romanticism, both with men and women around Elvis. Like Elvis is a cool dude, and you talk to the people who were around Elvis, and they loved the guy. They worshipped him. They really worshipped him. Like he was apparently just the nicest dude. And then Colonel Tom Parker comes into the fray and decides that he's going to play the vampire lord over Elvis and sucks him dry. But what's really fascinating about Elvis is that he like existed in this vacuum during the 60s. Like he spends most of his time holed up in Graceland. Like the 60s happened without Elvis Presley. Really. He does some movies. Like there was a movie deal. Colonel Tom Parker signed him to this very long-term movie deal, and he was very economical. He's like, okay, well, Elvis isn't going to tour. Elvis didn't tour during the '60s. Did not tour, and he basically stayed around Graceland, throwing dishes at Priscilla Presley, and hanging out with his boys, the Memphis Mafia. They went everywhere, did everything together. But he did not really travel unless he had to go do a movie. When he did a movie, of course, there was a soundtrack to a movie, so he was making music. But he wasn't really putting out any new albums, and he was under some form of mind control with Colonel Tom Parker, who was a bad dude. He wasn't even Tom Parker. He was like some Dutch guy, and he never had a U.S. passport because he got on a ship and jumped ship, I believe in New York City, and he would never allow Elvis to tour overseas because he was afraid that if he went overseas, that his status would be scrutinized, and then if it was scrutinized, he'd find out that he was tied to a murder in Holland, so he was running away on a murder charge too. He was a bad dude, and Elvis went through that whole thing with the army, and that was a total kind of mind control trip too. Like, look at all the other people during that time who were around. Like, did Jerry Lee Lewis go in the army? No. Did Pat Boone go in the army? No. None of these other people went in the army, but Elvis went in the fucking army. What, it's like, okay, let's bring Elvis in. Boy, won't this be great? It was like that was a total publicity stunt. So anyway, Elvis comes back, probably has some mind control going on in the army. Meets Priscilla Presley, who's about 14 years old, by the way, and can't take his eyes off of her. She winds up eventually moving to Graceland. But the '60s happened without Elvis. So while we watch this documentary on Elvis, and then we watch this documentary on Brian Wilson. And Brian Wilson was, another. All these people are just kind of twisted geniuses. And Elvis was a genius in his own right. Elvis was actually a pretty good actor too, if they'd let him act and have some decent roles. Anyway, Brian Wilson was amazing compositionally. Now, he couldn't write a lyric to save his life. He was always in that Gemini fashion, trying to find somebody to do the writing with. And he went through a whole list of songwriters, including Van Dyke Parks and a bunch of folks. I think even like Terry Melcher and Charles Manson at one point kind of, wandered into the Beach Boys circle, not through Brian, but through Dennis Wilson. Anyway, but there's all these things happening in the '60s. There's Phil Spector, The Wall of Sound. There's a freak. Brian Wilson. There's amazing things happening sonically with audio. The Beatles, George Martin. I mean, it's incredible, right? There's this explosion, and Elvis is just holed up in Graceland, eating peanut butter and banana fried sandwiches, doing an occasional movie, getting fatter and fatter, and taking all these fucking drugs. And Colonel Tom Parker just parasitically leeching off of him. And he finally wakes up in the '70s a little bit. He finally comes out of this slumber. In this deep slumber, and he's a mess, right? He's had years. Meanwhile, Brian Wilson is going through the same thing. He's taking all these very different drugs, by the way. Brian Wilson was much more into psychedelics. He's a big psychedelic head, but he was into other drugs too. And Brian Wilson, of course, had his own challenge with fast food. I mean, he spent years just staying at home, sitting in the sandbox with the piano. But what I'm trying to get at here is that Elvis was just completely cordoned off. He was in lockdown, and had Elvis had some, it would have been interesting to see what Elvis could have done. And I'm not even a huge Elvis fan. I'm just thinking about this culturally. What Elvis could have done had he been, how do I say this? Involved in some of the production of the 1960s. Think of Brian Wilson and Elvis Presley. Like, why didn't that happen? That would have been just fucking amazing. That would have been really, really amazing. Why didn't the Rolling Stones and Elvis Presley happen? Why didn't that happen? Probably because of Colonel Tom Parker. But they're in an alternate reality, right? Which would be a kind of interesting show. there could have been so much more that could have been done. And I don't think he was limited. I think what happened, he was under mind control. Jasper has me under mind control, by the way, don't you, Jasper? Yeah. His face. That face. Maybe we should start making cat videos. I don't make I don't make a huge amount of money doing this, but there are people with cat videos that have millions and millions of hits. Jasper would be more, if I had the right vehicle for Jasper, probably needs an agent. If I had the right vehicle for Jasper, I think he would surpass me in popularity and earning potential. Maybe I'm going about this completely wrong. I could turn Jasper into a superstar and make millions and millions of dollars with the right content. So if anybody out there wants to represent Jasper, if there's a Colonel Tom Parker out there that wants to represent Jasper, let me know. Okay? Let me know. He's available. All right, let me check in with the Chatlanders. See what you guys are up to. What's going on in your world? Why I would have wanted mind control for Elvis for what? Because you can control his ass. That's why. These are cat videos. You can control Elvis. Yes, Elvis had a twin. Elvis did have a twin as a girl and died. The story of the twin, right? The story of the twin is that if a twin dies, the spirit of the twin and the power of the twin moves into the other person, the one who's still alive. So Elvis was living with, maybe double power. Ow, Jasper's biting me now. He's biting me. So he was totally mind controlled because it's like Elvis was an MK Ultra artist, just like in some ways Britney Spears or Amy Winehouse or fill in the blank. He was an early MK Ultra artist. He went through mind control. Total mind control. He became kind of this vegetal shell of his former self, and still very, very talented. But what happens with mind control is you get to make money off of people, and they don't have It's almost like Elvis was Colonel Tom Parker's slave. He always deferred to this murderous cunt who was his manager. I have no love lost for that guy. Bad dude, really bad dude. Some people say, well, would we have Elvis without Colonel Tom? Of course we would. That is a transcendent talent right there. Elvis Presley. Let's see. What do we got? Elvis, by the way, was also an esotericist. There are very strong links to Elvis Presley and theosophy. Isn't that interesting? Doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me at all. So you can look that up on the internets. All right, let's see what else we got here in Chatlandia. The mid-60s, Uranus-Pluto conjunction unleashed a huge amount of creative tension and energy. That's true. It's absolutely true. That's a brilliant, brilliant insight, Mark. Absolutely. Also, Pluto and Leo generation, very creative, highly creative. You may diss the boomers, but let's be clear. They made really good art. Made really, really good art. Speaking of good art, I can't get into the show today without talking about Ricky Gervais. How badass was that? I was watching that live. I seldom watch these shows. I talked about it on Sunday night. I seldom watch these shows. And I was watching the game. The game was over. And I didn't change the channel. And I was like, do I want to watch this Golden Globe thing? I hate these shows. I used to break down all the award shows with all the symbolism and stuff. And that just got boring after a while. Oh, here we go again. Horse, duality, there's Baphomet. Oh, yeah, look at this. Depravity. Oh, here's a sign that they slept with this person. And it just got so, I could still do it, but it just got so boring. And it's like, there's this inculcation, this esoteric inculcation that takes place. It's like you're being inculcated into a particular system. You're being inculcated into the Babylon system. And it's not bad if you understand that that's what you're doing, right? But it's sort of like, oh, we're just gonna, splatter the Babylonian mystery school all over these events because, well, there's other reasons why, obviously, because there were actual rituals going on at the same time these events were going on, oftentimes underneath the places that were actually having these events. How about that? Reminds me of when Muhammad Ali fought George Foreman in, of all places, Kinshasa, Zaire. Great movie, by the way. There's a great movie about that fight. Really, really great movie. And it shows a lot. It's a documentary about that fight. It's brilliant, man. It's so brilliant. And one of the things you see is the emergence of Don King coming onto the scene, and that in and of itself is something to behold. But there was this brutal regime happening in Zaire, and they put the rink, the boxing ring, which is interesting, right? Circling the square. They call it a ring, and yet it's square. That's esoteric. So they put the ring. It's not a ring, but they put the ring inside of this massive stadium. It was a massive stadium for a number of different reasons. At one time it was a massive like soccer stadium, but they were also like doing executions, and there was like an underground jail underneath the stadium, and they were like they were executing people. Now I don't know if they were executing people during the fight, but it was where that fight took place was the site of some. And let's face it, when you get into stuff like killing people for their political beliefs, or it gets really ugly. That's a dark ritual. It may not have all the trappings, all the sigils of a dark ritual, but trust me, it's a dark ritual. And so they had this fight on the site of where all these dissidents who didn't like what was happening in Zaire were killed. So bringing back to the awards, it's like, wow, man, these awards events would happen and they still do, but there's shit going on simultaneously. Bringing it back to the Golden Globes, I'm sitting there watching, and all of a sudden within like a minute, I'm like, oh boy, where's this going? Where's this going, Ricky Gervais? This is interesting. And he just took a freaking flaming samurai sword to everything. Everything. Now, what's interesting about that, and Emily and I are going to do a show on this week. We're going to talk about that more. We're going to do a MASH this week. What's interesting about that show is that there are two things that have to happen. One is that the Golden Globes people, the Hollywood Foreign Press, which is what it is, a very strange organization, by the way. A little tiny place in South Hollywood. Tiny, it's like, you'd think there would be more, but you go to their website and you don't even really find out like who's a part of the Hollywood Foreign Press. It's just weird. It's a weird thing. But yet they have these awards every year, and they've been having these awards for a very long time. Anyway, they have to get the script. They know what Ricky Gervais is going to talk about. They know exactly what he's going to talk about. They got the script. And why do they have the script? Because there are people in the monologue that they need to have cameras on. They needed to have a camera on Tom Hanks. How classic was that, to watch his face or Spielberg's face and all these other faces, watching them feel incredibly uncomfortable. But they needed to know where those people were at given points in the script, so that when he talked about them, it wasn't like, oh, quick, let's go find Tom Hanks. No, that camera was right there because they had the script in front of them. So that was all pre-approved or approved. So what now? The question now becomes, well, why is that? Is this more hidden in plain sight stuff? Is that what's going on? Or are there factions inside of Hollywood? Now, if you go to the website of the Hollywood Foreign Press, which is the people behind the Golden Globes, and you look at because they actually support and donate to a number of different causes mostly having to do with cinema and film. And if you look at what they donate to, you'll say, wow, man, these people are fucking woke. They got some woke shit that they're behind. They have this one program that they help fund called, Ghetto Cinema. That sounds pretty woke to me. Then they have another project over here called Outfest. I mean, just fill in the blank there. So from that perspective and looking down into that, it's like, well, these are, it kind of fits the Hollywood mold in a lot of ways. But my feeling is there had to be somebody inside of that group, apart from even sort of the figurehead of that group, who decided to greenlight this for whatever reason and have it set up so that he could actually do the monologue and have everything set up along the way so that the shots would be there. They knew what was coming, right? Well, at least they did. I don't think the people in the audience knew, which was beautiful. You see the looks on their faces. They didn't know. But it was great nonetheless. And this is a theme that I'm going to talk about as we get into Iran, as we slowly wade into this with Iran. This is a theme, like factions, splits, divides that aren't always knowable, seeable, traceable on the surface of things. So is there a split and a divide somewhere inside of Hollywood? Well, there always has been. There's always been divides inside of Hollywood. We had, these quote unquote conservative actors and actresses who would have their own basically secret society. The cedar fever is really bad now, by the way. I'm having a wee bit of an allergic reaction to it. So these guys like John Voight and Dean Cain and Tim Allen, they would meet in private. John Milius, I don't know if he had to meet in private. John Milius is a freak, man. But they would meet in private because they didn't want, they were like, man, we want to get roles. We don't want to have to, we don't want to have to, we want to work. We want to make money. So they had to meet in private. So there's always been these different factions. I mean, again, even John Milius is a great example. I mean, John Milius is a freaking hardcore Zionist. He's a hardcore Zionist. He's a gun freak. I mean, and it gets played out in a lot of his movies. And if you watched The Big Lebowski, John Goodman's character, Walter Sobchak, is based on John Milius. And that's again, and John Milius, obviously Jewish. He made a lot of, quote unquote, progressive Jews very nervous. They didn't dig Milius's act. Of course, his greatest imprint on American cinema, Red Dawn. Anyway, and maybe Conan, the first Conan, pretty good stuff. So there are these factions, right? Inside, groups within groups. We see this in the CIA and the FBI, and I think, and I'm going to bring this into Iran now. I think that this is what's happening to a large extent with Iran. All right, let's see what we got here. First of all, we can't talk about what happened or what's happening in Iran without talking about Netanyahu, Bibi. Let me see if I can do my Bibi Netanyahu. I'd like to praise Donald Trump as a great American president who unflinchingly acted in the interest of safety and security in the Middle East. How's that for? I'd have to work on my Netanyahu a little bit. He's doable though. I don't know. I mean, he's got enough vocal characteristics. Netanyahu praises Trump for killing Qasem Soleimani. Says Israel stands by U.S. Oh, gee, isn't that a shock? So both these guys are going through some major political shit. I mean, I don't understand how the democracy thing works in Israel. I mean, it's just, people always say, well, it's the only democracy in the Middle East. Well, tell me how it fucking works, because I don't get it. Just like I don't get the elections in some of these other. I'm going to call for an election. Let's call for an election. Well, didn't we just have one? Like a year? I don't care. Let's call for one. You know, at least here we understand it's every 4 years, every 2 years. You know, everything else is a fucking mess. But at least we know, okay? I'm going to call for an election. Okay, let's go. Who's with me? Come on, boys. Election time. I'm just trying, you know, this is their version of a democracy. They've had 3 elections with this guy and Benny Gantz. And Gantz actually got the majority, but not enough. And these 2 parties, and then there's this one party in the center, and this one party in the center is held by, you know, another kind of, you know, freakazoid extreme faction, maybe has 10 people in the Knesset, which is, you know, their governing body. And so Gantz and Netanyahu have to kind of form a coalition government. You know, oh, that's right. You know, this is going on, and they're going to have another election again. Meanwhile, this guy's got 10 people in the Knesset, you know, is dangling them over the 2. I mean, this to me, this is not a clear-cut democracy. I don't know what you call that. I'm sorry. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. Oh, isn't this look interesting? Hairstylist killed, testicles eaten by grinder date from hell. Oh boy. Oh boy, isn't that interesting? That's just too much. Robert Kraft's nightmare, Tom Brady scenario very much in play. Good. I hope Robert Kraft actually feels a little pain. By the way, his little case down there in Florida has not gone away. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Oh, by the way, both Trump and Netanyahu are having difficult times politically. Netanyahu's been dogged by corruption charges. And by the way, speaking of democracy, Netanyahu was not only like the president of Israel, but he had all these other titles. He had like 4 or 5 other titles. It was like if Trump was both the president, Secretary of Defense, which is what Netanyahu was, president, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Interior. Like that's what Netanyahu had. He had like 4 or 5. And look, it's their country, right? If you basically do whatever you want within reason, I suppose. But how democratic is that? I mean, to me, that's almost dictatorial. Like, what system allows for somebody to wear all those different hats? It doesn't seem very democratic, in my estimation. So when people say it's the only democracy, can you please explain their democracy? Do you know how it works? You can ask them that. How often do they have elections? How is the Knesset formed? You know, what sort of, who are the parties there? Netanyahu's in trouble. He's in trouble. He's been running on the ragged edge of this corruption deal with his wife for who knows how long. Long time, right? So would he benefit from a war in the Middle East? Damn right he would. Damn right he would. Could it suspend this next election with Benny Gantz, who, you know, he's no real alternative to Netanyahu? Would it suspend that? Possibly. What about Trump? Does Trump have his own political issue? Damn right he does. Would you know? And by the way, man, most people, although now the Democrats are being the anti-war party. Like, where the fuck were you Democrats in the year 2001? Where were you then? Silent. Absolutely silent. If you didn't vote for war against Iraq at that time, there were only 2 people that voted against the war. One was that Barbara Lee Jackson. Or Barbara Lee, Sheila Jackson. But no, it's Barbara Lee, the representative from California, East Bay. She didn't vote for it. There are only two people who didn't vote for that war. But if you didn't vote for that war during that time, you were probably not going to get reelected. That was a transpartisan issue. You had to vote for that war because the propaganda and the programming was so thick, and the people were so incensed and wounded and traumatized, and their pride around being American was so damaged that this was the only thing you could do. Not only that, but ensure the safety of Americans moving forward. A total setup, perfect psychological operation, 9/11. But now all of a sudden, the Democrats are the anti-war party, and Nancy Pelosi wants to limit Trump's war powers. War power. Oh, where were you? You people are phony assholes. We needed you. If you had actually stepped in, we wouldn't be in this mess now. Right? Remember when the Democrats were the anti-war party? George McGovern, Eugene McCarthy, Hubert Humphrey, they were not for the war. They wanted out. They wanted out of Vietnam. That's when the
All right, here we go. All right, we got sound. Should I just leave this on, even though I'm not like talking through these headphones anymore, or through this mic? I always get a pretty good run off this mic, and all of a sudden it just cuts out. Let's take this off. Now you can hear me. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. Appreciate that. So, Iran has the largest Shia majority. More than 66 million people, 66 million people. That, you know, that's like 90% of the population of Iran. That's a lot of Shia. And Saudi Arabia is predominantly Sunni. I think the Shia might be something like 15%. And who do we know that ponies up and likes to pal around with the Saudis? Trump. Jared Kushner, who was very tight with Mohammed bin Salman. And of course, there's always been ties between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Look, the House of Saud originally at one point in time came from Israel. True fact. Look it up. When they established, you know, their kingdom in the desert. So what we have is we have basically the Sunnis versus the Shias. And during the Obama administration, they backed the Sunnis. They totally backed the Sunnis. I'm sorry, the Shia, my bad, the Shia, inside of Iran. What was Saudi Arabia doing during that time? Saudi Arabia was producing huge amounts of oil. Huge amounts of oil. They went into overproduction. And as a result of that, it totally crippled the oil production in the state of Texas, New Mexico. It just went flat. There was so much oil available that they had all these tankers lined up. They couldn't get them in fast enough. They were just, we were drowning in oil. And it got so bad in some of those Saudi wells that they were starting to hit water. There was clearly an act of economic aggression pointed at Obama in the United States. It was, you know, they still wanted to make money off their oil. They have these deals in place, you know, with the Seven Sisters. But that's what was going on. So it's these two groups, right? It's the Shia and the Sunni, and so this is what's going on, and this is kind of what's behind the scenes. So you have the United States and Israel, you have the Shia and the Sunni, you have the both kind of faiths or versions of that faith backed by various factions. You know, the Shia backed by the Obama administration. So when they say the deep state was involved, like that Soleimani was deep state, really what the translation for that is that Soleimani, the Shia Muslim, was and had ties to the Obama administration, because I would bet dollar for dollar that they would be more on the Shia side of Islam than the Sunni side. They're not on the Sunni side of the street. And then what do we have now with the Trump administration and Jared Kushner and Mohammed bin Salman? They're tight, man. They're tight. Of course, Kushner is very, very tight with his uncle Bibi. He's not really his uncle, but you know, kind of, you know what I'm saying, Uncle Bibi. These are the factions that we're talking about here. This is what we don't always see. Just like we're not seeing really what was going on behind the scenes in the Golden Globes. You know, why would the Golden Globes greenlight that monologue? You know, they could say, man, you know, we don't like this. This is hateful. It's because there's factions within factions, which is in some ways quite good. Because you drill down, then there's factions within factions again. in other groups and other orientations. Just like, I'll give you an example. I'm not going to divulge the name of this person, but they are a pretty well-known internet presenter. And I had a conversation with them one time, and they got a call from somebody that was inside the CIA. And at first they thought it was a joke. And then the person rattled off everything that they shouldn't have known about that person, but did, just to prove that they had inside scoops, inside info, that they were legit, got this person's attention. And they said they'd been following him for a while. And that they were supportive of his work. They also said that there were people inside the same group that did not support his work and basically wanted him dead. So, we got your back. That was the message. This is what I'm talking about. You can even look at these fifth column groups inside the FBI, Peter Strzok, who was both FBI and CIA. So we're not just dealing with something so black and white, like, oh, it's the deep state. Yeah, there is some of that, but there are these alliances, these allegiances, these gang affiliations, because a lot of ways are gangs, really is what they are, glorified gangs with an Abrahamic bent. But this is what we're dealing with here. And so to understand what's happening is you have to really peel these layers away. And it'll go even deeper and deeper and deeper. And then there's strange alliances where people go back and forth and have double, triple identities and agendas. This is why the world in some ways is such a mess. And it just can't be so straightforward. The one thing that, really stood out, and I'm about to transition into another topic and subject, which I actually touched on a little bit on Sunday night, is that, while we are parading around the Middle East, Iraq, Iran, threatening, saber rattling bombers, big, was it B-35 or, bombers, big ones. They're on their way now. They're on the way to the Middle East. We got the Saturn-Pluto conjunction coming right on time. That's all happening. What's not happening is like what's taking place here in this country. Tucker Carlson is running a 5-day special. Sounds funny. Tucker Carlson. Tucker cracks me up sometimes. His laugh is weird, but I kind of like it. Anyway, they spent some time in San Francisco. Now they're breaking down San Francisco. It's called American Dystopia. It's almost like Tucker exists because they have to have Tucker exist. It's almost like this esoteric act that Tucker Carlson must exist. Like he must be the truth teller. He must be the predictive programmer, hidden in plain sight kind of guy. It's kind of like how every court had a court jester. They had to have a court. Not that he's a court jester. Ricky Gervais is a court jester. But it's almost like he has to exist in order for all the other stuff to exist in some ways. Does that make sense? Or else, why would he be there? He gets good ratings, by the way. That's one of the reasons why. Anyway, watch this series. San Francisco, a city that I grew up in and around, a city that is very magical in a lot of ways, very dark too, in many aspects as well. The dystopic version of San Francisco is nothing new. Like when I was living there, it still had elements of that. It just wasn't as widespread. But it's become this flashpoint for the degradation of the American experience inside of, urban areas. San Francisco and every American city should be a jewel, should be a shining jewel, and they're being turned into cesspools, absolute cesspools. So it's definitely worth watching. But there's no, if we had as much money and as much passion and inflamed intensity around this country and the homeless issue, we can solve this. We could solve this, and it should be priority number one. Priority number one. It's not. We're off running around fighting other people's fucking wars. Whether we're standing up for the Sunni versus the Shia, or we're protecting this bizarre democracy in the Middle East, right? I mean, come on now. You know, bring it home. Wasn't that the original mandate? Somebody's lost their eye on the ball. Oh, we gotta go clean up the deep state. We got deep state operatives over there. You know, fuck the deep state, right? Strengthen the immune system. Strengthen the immune system so much that the deep state can't even exist anymore. It's an anaerobic effect. All right, where are we? Here's my story. Here's my story. So this is what I'm talking about right here. One second. I talked about this on the Sunday night show. I'm going to give it some voice again because I think it's worthwhile. It needs to be addressed, especially in the context of that last rant. It's from the Austin Statesman. Stabbing suspect fled from officer before attack. Died after jumping from roof. This is the tragedy that happened. This was posted yesterday, and I guess this was 2 days ago. Let's see. It's on Friday. So this is in South Lamar. There's a lot of homeless in camp there. If you were to drive by there, it would be shocking. I hope it'd be shocking. I'll read this. This is such a bizarre story. Really weird on so many levels. A police officer was approaching 27-year-old Dylan Woodburn to detain him after disturbance at a South Austin coffee shop. Okay, Friday morning. Let me read this again. So I'm sorry. A police officer was approaching 27-year-old Dylan Woodburn to detain him after a disturbance at a South Austin coffee shop Friday morning when his duty belt came undone. Austin police said Monday. Now this is weird. Okay, his duty belt comes undone. What does that mean? How does your duty belt come undone? The only way the duty belt comes undone is if this guy decides that he wants to maybe pull his gun or do something. His duty belt came undone. That's just weird. It gave Woodburn an opportunity to escape. I mean, so what is his duty belt down around his ankles? And he can't like chase after the guy because he's having to deal with his duty belt? And run into a nearby restaurant where he stabbed a man to death. How bizarre is this? He's in a coffee shop. He's probably on the ragged edge. Another one of, well, Austin's weaponized homeless. And gets stopped by a cop whose duty belt comes undone. And now all of a sudden he's like, let me go run into this burrito shop and stab this motherfucker to death. This is so bizarre, right? Weird. Really weird. So if this guy's duty belt does not come undone, does Mr. Aguilar, Jonathan Aguilar, does he live? What about that as a weird twist of fate? And if I'm his family, and again, I talked about this on Friday night or Sunday night, I'm suing the city of Austin. Maybe this cop, I hate to say it, maybe the maker of the duty belt. I mean, come on, get your pound of flesh and then forgive. I mean, there's just something really weird about this whole thing. Like this guy's life pivoted on a failed duty belt. And then why would Dylan Woodburn, isn't his name? Woodburn. I guess he would burn. I guess he will burn now. Why would he just all of a sudden randomly go into, this is where it gets really strange. Freebirds. Died at the scene. Do you know to kill somebody with a knife, you know what you have to do? You have to hit some very specific spots. You have to either hit it's part of your neck right here. You have to get right into the heart. You have to cut major arteries to kill somebody. Or you literally have to hack them to death. It's not the most efficient way to kill someone, but it can be effective, I'm sure. This guy went in and just decided to kill this manager of this burrito place. Freebirds. Woodburn, who jumped from the roof after stabbing Aguilar and a second employee, he got some wax in another person, who survived, died that evening, police said. Austin Police Chief Brian Manley. Wouldn't you feel good about your police chief being named Manley? On some level, right? This is Police Chief Manley. Said officials are investigating the police response in the incident, including why the officer's duty belt came undone. I think you need to look into that a little bit. We want to know the circumstances under which the officer's duty belt came free. But see, that's kind of weird. Like they're blaming the duty belt now. Really, the issue is that this guy was running around. You'll see why this was an issue. Now they're turning it into the duty belt. Manley said, obviously, that is something that we do not expect to have happened. We expect to provide our officers with the best equipment. We expect our equipment to perform appropriately. That's why we're conducting this review. What you should be conducting a review about is this. Manley said the incident began at 7:49 a.m. Friday. Police got a call about a man. The police now believe was Woodburn. Oh, they now believe that. Okay. Holding a rock and verbally threatening people in front of the Bennu Coffee. Oh, this is interesting. Now it's getting interesting. Bennu Coffee Shop, a coffee at a shopping center on the corner of South Congress. It's on South Congress, not South Lamar. Is there Freebirds there? Oh, I thought Freebirds on East Riverside Drive. Okay. I thought Freebirds is on South. Anyway, South Congress Avenue, East Riverside Drive. Woodburn was homeless, police said. Records showed that he'd been charged in Travis County, burglary, and was convicted in Harris County on previous charges, including making a terroristic threat. You just can't make threats anymore. You make a threat now you're a terrorist, which means that once you're a terrorist, I mean, why didn't they just take him out with a drone? If he had made a terror, I mean, isn't that what happens now? What wasn't Soleimani labeled a terrorist? Why didn't they just drone this guy? Because he'd made a terroristic threat and possessing and dealing drugs. See, that's the problem. That this guy was part of catch and release, catch and release, catch and release. No clear path to get him better, make him better. And what are they doing? They're focusing on the duty belt. The duty belt. This is a very bizarre event on many levels. The fact that he threw himself headfirst, by the way, off of the Freebirds burrito shop. Free's a bird, right? And invoking the tower. That's the tower card. This event is really symbolic in so many ways. So many ways. Austin has better watch its P's and Q's, man. Like, Austin, clean up your act. And this is where I get incensed. I've got Mars and Cancer, so I get incensed. We should not have a homeless problem in this country. And if we do, it should be minimal. We should be throwing massive resources at getting these people off the streets into, real intervention programs. And I mean, take out all the stops. Let's bring in ibogaine. Let's bring in psilocybin. Let's get them turned around. Let's get them productive again. Let's put them in an environment where they can get counseling and therapy and work on some life skills. And let's create situations where, cities can actually have really, really affordable housing for people that are in transition, not meant to live there, but in transition. This is a systemic problem. And what are we doing? We're running off to Iraq and Iran so we can, figure out what side of the Shia-Sunni conflict that we're on, and to keep Benjamin Netanyahu out of political hot water. I was listening to talk radio yesterday. It's embarrassing. It's totally embarrassing. They're okay when they're into exposing the hypocrisy of the left. They're not so good when it comes to exposing the hypocrisy of the right. And I listened to this guy here in San Antonio, and he did something that somebody on the left would do. This guy had valid points. He basically said, look, we create these guys who are symbols of hate over and over again, whether it's Saddam Hussein, whether it's Osama bin Laden, now Soleimani, Kim Jong-un, you name it, man. Assad was one of those. You know that Assad's not one of those guys anymore? Have you noticed that? They've kind of moved on from Assad. He gasses his own people. There's always that. He gasses his own people. So he's talking about this in a very rational, logical manner. And this clown on talk radio, conservative talk radio, just shuts him down, berates him, cuts his mic, and dumps him. They don't want any real. They say they're, we'll have a good debate. We're open to, free speech and the exchange of ideas. No. When you really come to them with the real shit, not the Ocasio-Cortez stuff, they do exactly what the left does. They shout you down, they cut your mic, and you're off the show. Because they're there to sell an agenda. They're there to sell a program. And right now, that program is war. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That's what they're there to sell. And the focus is way off. It should be right here. What's interesting, and I didn't pick this up before, but I'm going to throw this into the mix now. Gets deeper. Who's heard of asteroid Bennu? 101955. Now remember, this was the coffee shop that Dylan Woodburn was at. Bennu. 101955 Bennu, provisional designation 1999 RQ, is a carbonaceous asteroid in the Apollo group, discovered by Linear Project on, wait for it, September 11th, 1999. Isn't that interesting? So we have 9111999. Excuse me. Inverted 666. It is a potentially hazardous object that is listed on the Century Risk Table with the second highest cumulative rating on the Palermo Technical Impact Hazard Scale. How up on the Palermo Technical Impact Hazard Scale are you guys? There'll be a quiz tomorrow. It has a cumulative 1 in 2,700 chance of impacting Earth. Those odds are actually pretty good. It's not like 1 in 27 million or 1 in 2.7 million, 1 in 2,700 chance. Like there's a better chance that that asteroid will hit this planet than I will win the lottery. Think about that for a moment. Put that in perspective. It's between 2175 and 2199. A little bit of ways off. But really is it? Question mark. It is named after the Bennu, the ancient Egyptian mythological bird associated with the sun, creation, and rebirth. So we got a bird theme going on here. We have Aguilar, Jonathan Aguilar, the eagle, murdered, Freebirds, right? Coffee shop, I'm sorry, Freebirds Burrito Shop, and Bennu, Cafe Bennu, 3 birds. Bennu associated with this asteroid. And then, by the way, I have heard chatter about Bennu, and that Bennu might actually be the famous so-called Planet X. Bennu is the largest of the OSIRIS-REx mission. Which is intended to return samples to Earth in 2023 before attempting to obtain a sample from the asteroid. Interesting stuff. Bennu. I gotta wrap things up. I gotta go put on the reading cap. Maybe I get Jasper to do my reading today. That'd be great. Jasper could do the readings. Anyway, I gotta go. Let's round it off here. We're living in very strange times. Times of signs, symbols, signifiers. Look around you. They're there. They're all around you. Sort through them, sift through them. There are also good signs in your life. Pay attention to those as well, because they're around, they're abundant. At the end of the day, the end of this broadcast, my hope, wish, dream, goal, and desire would be for us as a collective to move our attention to what's happening right here, to take care of our people, our family, our tribes. Doesn't matter what color skin they are. I don't care. They need our help. They don't just need Band-Aids. They need serious help. And until we address that, we got no business running around the rest of the world. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to set what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Have yourself a great day. I'll be back tomorrow.